So today let's talk about inboxes. Inboxes are one of those things that everyone has, but most people probably aren't using correctly. If you follow the GTD method or getting things done, capture is the first piece of that process, and that's really what inboxes are all about. It's where are your open loops, where does information gather, where do you collect info so that you can process it into your systems as you go. Inboxes would capture all types of information. For me, I have anything from actions to new calendar events to aspirations, goals, things I want to do, things I want to buy, movies I want to watch, ideas for a book, ideas for a YouTube video, ideas for a gift for a friend. All of these things populate your mind, and your mind sucks to remember information, so you should put it down in a system that you trust. For inboxes, at least for me, I need to trust my system and trust my processes for my mind to say, once it's written down in an inbox, I can let it go. This is a habit that I've built over several years of writing everything down. It honestly is probably one of the biggest life-changing habits that I've done. I can stay on top of things better. I know what my list of goals are. I know what I want to work towards in life. I know what's important to me. I always have that perfect gift for a friend. I always have my priorities in order. With that, you can also react and change as information is coming at you all the time. So inboxes not only will capture the things that you think about, but you should also think about where information naturally piles up. Where does information come to you? You know, if you are in a corporate environment or you work, you'll have messages, you might have a separate phone line or voicemail, you would have a separate email, you might have a physical inbox on your desk. You might also intake information from conversations with your boss or a colleague, a new project that's been assigned to you. The other piece for me that I kind of think about when I think about inboxes is how to automate what is in there. So not just strictly speaking, if you put something in, how can you automate it to the location it needs to go? But when I am processing my inbox, which is really the second step of GTD after you capture, but when you capture it, what can you do to make sure your mind doesn't have to remember that again in the future? For example, if you have an inbox item of buy dog food, what process or what system could you set up where your mind doesn't have to remember that anymore? You know, do you have a staple grocery list and you can add it to that as a trigger? If you have something like clean your baseboards that pops up, like unfortunately that task is not a one and done. You're going to have to do that every so often. So I will make sure that I set that up as a repeating task because I don't want my mind to have to remember that again. I also don't want to get to the point where my baseboards are extremely gross to remind me that I should do it. Another example would be taxes. You have to do taxes every year. Most of the time you're going to remember that date, but you shouldn't have to. Your system should do the work for you. And this is where in OmniFocus, I end up with a ton of repeating items because I'm thinking through this every time something goes in there. I don't know what all my routine tasks are. I didn't just set them up one day. It's as I've put things in my inbox, I've set them up to be recurring for a reason. Trusting your system is the other half of setting up your inboxes. On the one hand, if you are great at writing everything down, but you never process your inboxes, your mind is never going to trust it. If you have an inbox of 400, 500, 600 items, that's great, you wrote it down, but you're not alleviating the stress. You're still going to miss deadlines. You're still going to have information you can't find. On the flip side, if you actually do process your inboxes and you're very good at that, but you don't have a system in place to remind you of that or to be able to access that information when you need it, your mind's not going to trust that either. The whole point of capturing things, whether it's in a system, on paper, filing it somewhere, the whole point is that it's there when you need it and your mind doesn't have to remember it. So I have inboxes split into two different categories. I have daily inboxes and weekly inboxes. Daily inboxes for me get processed every single day. That's where if there is something that I need to do before I do my weekly inbox, it has to be in one of those daily locations. Anything that it's just kind of where information piles up, but you're not going to get those critical tasks in there, move it to a weekly interval. Make it easier for yourself. But the other rule you need to make with yourself is you will do that weekly. You will go through that and process that information. Part of processing my inboxes weekly is I also review my open loops. So not everything that you need might end up in one of these defined inboxes. You might have some other places that you need to go through to remind yourself of actions that you need to do, or maybe other ideas that you have. For example, I like to do different pieces of artwork or drawings or lettering pieces inside of Procreate. I'm not going to take that Procreate file and get that off my iPad into a digital folder to process during my weekly review. There's no point. Like it lives inside of that app. But there's also nothing critical about it. But what I do with my weekly review is I will look at Procreate and say, okay, are there any tasks I need to put in my OmniFocus related to this? You know, do I need to get this artwork done? Do I need to figure out how to do this type of a technique? Do I need a new brush to be able to finish this artwork off? I'll capture that, but I don't actually need to make my Procreate library 0. I'm just trying to capture open loops. Another example, if you deal with different queues of information, maybe it's in your job, maybe it's just kind of a workflow you've set up. For me, we use Jira. I'm not going to put every single one of those Jira cases assigned to me inside of OmniFocus. It all relates to our invoicing. And so instead, I have a task inside of OmniFocus to say, hey, do your Jira queue on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But what I will do as part of that Friday processing is I will look through and say, okay, is there anything big in here that I actually do need to take on as a separate task on its own? Again, I'm trying to capture that open loop inside of my inbox at the same time. So if you're just starting out or you're watching this and thinking, okay, how do I revamp my inboxes? The first place to start with is just brainstorm the list of all the different places where information gathers in your life, whether it be an internal or an external. So internal are going to be those thoughts, those ideas, those things that come from you. External is going to be, again, messaging apps, voicemail inboxes, email inboxes, anywhere where someone could give you something that's going to pile up and that you need to review. So start by brainstorming all of that out. The next thing is to look at that and figure out what can you consolidate. Just because you have an app that has a spot for an inbox doesn't mean you should be capturing information in that spot. Is there something you can do to consolidate your email accounts? Is there something you can do to consolidate your messaging? Is there something you can do to consolidate the different places that paper piles up? How many can you get it down to? But at the same time, keep what's necessary. When you've gone through that, then think about what is the type of information that ends up in those spots? How frequently should you process that? What should be a daily? What should be a weekly? Again, where would you put a task that you need to do within the next few days? And then the next step is to make a list of those daily, a list of those weekly, and figure out when it makes sense to process those. For me, I process my daily inboxes in my shutdown routine, which is typically like 4 to 5 every day. So it's the last hour of my workday. Most of my shutdown routine is focused on like work email and communications. And so I process all my inboxes at that time. On a weekly cadence, I do that Friday afternoons because it's a great way just to kind of get all the loose ends, get anything finished that needs to be finished, get any email sent that needs to get sent, but get everything down to 0 and get a complete task inventory inside of OmniFocus. So that would be how to think about your inboxes. But let's flip that coin and think about capturing. Capturing is all about what is the least amount of friction and the quickest way to capture information that you have. Inboxes are gonna be there. You're gonna get email, you're gonna get phone calls, you're gonna get messages. They're there. But the stuff inside of your head, if you do not capture that, you will not remember it, your mind won't be at ease, or you won't be able to take action on it. So when I think about inboxes in terms of how can I capture info the quickest, there's three mediums. There's text, there's photos, and there's voice. So I don't think too much about the app location. If I'm driving, I'm like, you know what? That is a great idea. I want to put that in my outline for this video. I'm not going to realistically be able to open up my phone, open up the document, and add that into the outline just because I thought of it. If I don't do it, I'm not going to remember that either. So when I think about text, how do I capture text? For me, the app that I use is Drafts. Drafts has a ton of really cool integrations with it to automate getting that info into other places. Maybe that will be a future video of how I use Drafts, but if it is text-based and I need a capture, it doesn't matter if it's gonna be video outline, doesn't matter if it's a shopping list item, doesn't matter if it's a task, doesn't matter if it's, a paragraph that I need to send an email to someone. If it's text, I'm going to capture it inside of Drafts. Photos is a way I capture a lot of information as well. It is really easy to snap a photo or a screenshot to remind you to do something later. And the other way is voice. I use voice memos a lot. This video actually started as a voice memo in the car when I was driving because it's really easy with the watch to just open up the voice memos and just start. Drafts also is really easy on the watch. It has a great dictation tool to be able to capture some of that. But voice memos, if you need to talk for a long period of time and you have a lot of pauses and you're hemming and you're hawing, like voice memos is great. And then on the Mac when I'm working, I use the OmniFocus quick capture shortcut because it's so quick. And even though OmniFocus isn't going to hold things that aren't in action, it is the quickest place to capture that on my computer when I'm working. So the little trick that I use inside of OmniFocus is when I'm processing that inbox, because that is a daily one for me, if it's something that needs to go somewhere else, so it's not a task, but again, I'm trying to process quickly because this is just a daily thing, I actually have a project in OmniFocus called Outbox. And then when I get to my weekly reset, where I'm kind of going through and capturing those open loops and filing and doing inboxes, one of those items is to take the Outbox in OmniFocus and get all that information where it needs to go. So hopefully that helped give a little bit of insight into maybe how you could restructure your inboxes, how you could think about capturing info quicker and better into those inboxes, and really making that a core part of your system where you can trust the process and the system and not have to rely on your mind for everything. Let me know if you have any additional questions or comments, and we'll see you in the next one.